Well, hello and welcome. I'm here to talk about a 7-day miracle project that happened at the start of the pandemic in 2020. Now, this particular project is a case study in agile project delivery. And the reason is it went from inception to execution and go live in 7 calendar days. Hang on a minute. That can't be possible. But well, it did happen. Before we go into the project details, some housekeeping. So all the information that I'm sharing today is essentially available on the public domain. There's nothing commercially or technically sensitive. It just covers my experience with the delivery and managing this particular project and some learnings from it. So let's set some background on this one. So in 2020, the world went into its first lockdown in our lifetime. There were a lot of unknowns. Work from home wasn't a thing. Most people were going into the office. And for all of us, it's the first time we've ever heard of something like airport closures and people getting stranded. And we were also worried, like people were worried about the hospitalization rate of COVID. And one of the worries for that was, do we have enough ICU capacity? Do we have enough beds, ventilators, and personal protection equipment for the frontline workers? And this IT project that we are going to talk about is the one that created a solution to track essential resources like hospital bed, ventilators, and personal protection equipment for those on the front line, especially in the ICUs. And the scope of this particular project was for the hospitals in Australia and New Zealand who had ICU as a facility. The project did win the IT News Award in 2021 in the health category for the incredible speed in which it has been delivered and for the importance it had on patient health outcomes. Why are we actually diving into such a project? And after all this time, I would say it's because of two reasons. One, when the story is real, that it means that it is practical and any takeaways that we get from that is an achievable one. That's the reason we go for case studies. The second reason why this project has some importance in us analyzing it is because this was a very compressed project. And it means that a lot of things have to go right than wrong for this project to go live and for it to be effective. I also want to talk a little bit about the format of some of the slides that are coming up. I do talk about some of the reasons why I feel the project succeeded. I've listed about 8 of them. And I also talk about what could be a takeaway question that can be applied to your particular project or organization or team that you're working in, that you can use to introspect and figure out, is there something that you can learn from this project for applying to your project for a better outcome? The first reason why I think the project succeeded was that it had a tremendous clarity of vision. We had a tagline, something like a North Star goal to keep us in the same direction. And the goal was that if we have a hospital that is full or almost full, and we have a hospital that is maybe even just across the border of states that had available capacity, we should be able to route a patient to the hospital with the best availability of resources than to create additional wait time and a negative outcome for the patient. Now, one of the two tests for a clear vision statement is whether it enables decision making at every level. And an example of this one would be, say, if you're a database engineer trying to create table structures and columns, and you can then think about whether this data structure is going to directly enable our vision or is it a nice to have item, which means that for many of the things you can prioritize on whether the activity that you're doing is going to impact the vision directly or not. And also project managers and delivery leads can make use this particular vision statement to align themselves to prioritize on things. So the takeaway question here is, does your vision or mission statement help simplify decision making in your projects? And if not, how can you get there? It's all well and good if you have a good vision for the project, but then it is really, really important that you have people behind that vision who can translate that into the actual mission of execution. And there's a few things that I would consider here. One is the will to sponsorship. We can have ideas, we can have a good vision for changing the world, but if we do not have a sponsor to put people and resources and money behind it, it is never going to come to fruition. And in any organization, if you don't have people who have the ability to direct resources to that particular mission, then it just stays as a vision. There is no mission here. The second one is the will to execute. You need people who are operators who would take on a mission, understand how to bring it about into reality. And that's really, really important as well, because a lot of projects start with big outcomes in mind, but end up being executed quite poorly. And the third, I would say, is an understanding of the goals of your minimum viable product. So we keep talking about minimum viable product and how the MVP should behave, but it's always important to translate into what are the goals for the MVP for the stakeholders who are going to use that minimum viable product. And once you know that, you should be able to negotiate fiercely to stick to that scope and ensure that the project does not go out of hand, because scope creep is a real thing. And we need to know when it is a good scope change to enable us for the mission versus when it can derail the whole thing. And the last one, you have a good vision, we have people who can deliver it, but without the knowledge of how things work and what can actually work in the real world, from the industry perspective, it is a moot point if we do not have that knowledge and access to that knowledge. So access to SMEs, subject matter experts from the industry, is critical. And if you do not have that, then the project can be good, but the product will not or might not succeed in the real world. Thankfully, in this project, we did have these access. We had access to people in ICUs who would provide us the suggestions of how things work there. And we had access to SMEs who understood how the patient transportation industry worked. So my takeaway question for you here is, in your organization, do you have leaders that enable you to execute and convert your vision into a mission rather than just pass the vision statement to the team and say, try and make it happen? The third factor that I would mention is team composition. We know that cross-functional teams work. It is because they have access to all the roles and skills that they require to complete the project. I have listed here a few roles that we had for this project. We had a cross-functional team who could bring this about without missing any important aspect of the solution. So my takeaway question for you is, for your team, do you have access to the type of skills to complete your project without delays? Or is it going to go to an external team where you need to wait on them? Now, external teams can be as effective as a role embedded within the team, as long as you have a good turnaround time and you have good cohesion for it. Number four is access to intellectual property, people, and resources. I did mention about access to things like SME knowledge and pilot users in a couple of slides back, but it's not just that. You need to be able to work backwards from your go live. What are the things that you need at the time of go live? Do you know how to communicate with all the stakeholders? Do you know the medium of communication? Can they access it? For example, in our case, we were lucky enough to work with the ANZ Intensive Care Society, who knew how to reach the ICUs in all the hospitals. Do you know what is do you have people with connectivity? Do they have any sort of other issues that prevent them from connecting or doing the tasks for the go live or before the go live at the time that it is required? So it's very important to work backwards from your go live to have at least a rough idea on what your end goal is and how your release process would look like and what are the contingencies you have if the release gets blocked or one of the tasks get blocked or if a particular person is unavailable. Do you have backups? And from that, my takeaway question for you is that do you have a clear rollout plan and measures of success and backup for many of the steps that you consider are very critical in that particular rollout plan? Number 5 is project and people management. Project management is a term that our IT industry is trying to come to terms with because agile methodologies like Scrum has put a dent in project management, and they moved some of the discipline of project management into the process itself, some into the Scrum Master role, and even changed around some of the supporting roles like BA. We can say it's actually kind of non-existent in frameworks like Scrum. So there's still organizations that use project management terminology and organizations that use agile terminology and refer to them as delivery leads. But at the end of the day, if you have a project, then it needs to be managed. And without good management, what happens is that you cannot bring all the pieces together and keep the team focused on the finish line. Alignment is one of the biggest contribution of project management. One of the Spotify phrases that I like is aligned autonomy. It talks about centralized direction but distributed decision making. Very similar to what we talked about in the vision statement. You need a centralized direction so that people are quite aligned to the outcome of the project, but then your decision making should be really distributed at the level where it requires that particular decision to be made. You don't want all the 10 members of a project, or if you're talking different teams, all different teams running off in a different direction, completely autonomous, not aligned, trying to do their own thing because they're very autonomous and not having any consensus of where we're heading as an organization or a project. You want to have centralized direction in terms of where we are all heading, but the decision making, as I mentioned, should be localized. For example, the database expert should be able to make decisions around the database, how the database can align to the particular project, but remain aligned with the goal of the MVP. Skills and passion are also very important, and you have to pick the right skill set for your team. You cannot pick junior team members for a very critical project for a very short period of time. Whereas having no junior team members in a long-term project means that you do not have any succession planning. So the team has to be of the right mix of skills to enable the outcome. And this is one of the goals of good project or delivery management. In our case, this was a very short project, which meant that we had to be really, really picky with the skills that we brought into the project. Another skill that delivery leadership can bring in is to get people working very closely together, setting aside any small differences, and focused to stay on the mission. So the takeaway question is that how well does your team know each other, and is there enough management or leadership to tactically glue people together and keep them focused on the outcome? Is there enough management or leadership within the team itself to see what's coming, and even if there are some sparks of disagreement or discontent between team members or stakeholders, to bring them together and keep them focused on the outcome? And that's where good project and people management comes to play. We will briefly talk about technology decisions. In our case, for this particular project, we went cloud first because of the unknown scale and the requirement to deploy rapidly. But we ensured that there are data sensitivity checks, there are security assessments, ensuring that we really give due importance to what is a very health-centric project. So we gave a lot of importance to ensuring that things were secure, things were scalable. In other cases, if the data is not that sensitive, then you can think about reducing some of the measures and controls and setting them appropriately. Um, and we also went with familiar technologies for the team because of the rapid development cycle. So in your project, the takeaway question from me would be, are you choosing the right technology fit for the purpose, which is not over-engineered, not under-engineered, but just right. And if it's long term, then you will have to adopt things that are emerging and for the future as well, as long as it is fit for purpose again. We might figure out probably later that we should have done X better, or maybe we could have done Y that way, but then that's always going to be there. But at least at the time, our decision should meet what we think is the right fit for purpose. And on a similar theme, no project is going to be perfect. You might need to take some shortcuts in some places. You might need to defer certain things for a phase two. There needs to be a good recognition of what the limitations are and what are you trying to address as a solution. The big question is it all moving in a positive direction? Tech debt is inevitable. And so the big question, again, as a takeaway question, is that tech debt is inevitable. And do your stakeholders understand MVP as a fully functioning product versus a fully finished product? And do they understand the limitations of the current environment and the current scope and time that is allocated to the project so that we can achieve the best possible outcome without eliminating any important functionalities or without satisfying any sort of important functionality? Can we achieve the right sort of outcomes? And what is it that we need to defer for a later stage for addressing? This is probably the most important slide of it all. It is trying to address the core of the miracle project, of how this project went from inception to completion in 7 days. We started on a Friday afternoon, we went live by the next Friday night. And like any magic or miracle, there's always some tricks involved. The trick for this particular project is that there were a lot of conditions that were favorable or well utilized to the lead up to this particular project, which were built up meticulously over time. So what enabled us to go that fast? So we had some existing contractual agreements where it was very reliable, which meant that we could go very quickly on some of the slower paces of usual project starting. We were able to also scale up very quickly and find the right skills and form a team in a matter of hours. And remember, this is week two of lockdowns. Um, but we were already very good in working from home policies where 8 of our 10 team members were used to working from home already. We had existing arrangement where it was all right to work from home. In fact, it was encouraged actually to work from home, especially if you are having a really focused a day of real focus. Another one of the skills is another one is the skills, finding the right skill mix and negotiating for the right people to be on the project. And we also had other things like the deep systems knowledge which has been built up over the years, SME knowledge, industry knowledge within the team. At least 30% of our team members were very familiar with the industry and the technology, and all of them were gurus in their own field. But they have essentially worked on similar systems before, and they were already aware of the health sector and patient transportation. So all of these little things matter when it comes to such a crucial time frame, because at the end of the day, everything has to line up, and more things have to go right rather than wrong for a project of this compressed time frame to succeed. And commitment is a huge factor as well, because everybody wanted to contribute to the pandemic in some way. Teams did pull long working hours to ensure that we got this out the door. And last but least, not the least, team dynamics is a huge one as well, because this was a hand-picked team. We were able to manage people's expectations with each other and manage their relationships with each other, and get them to work really closely together. There were moments of disagreement between the team members, and we were able to overcome all that and gel together to ensure that the mission succeeds. So what we can learn from this, and my takeaway question here is that, are you making decisions right now that will help steer any sort of unexpected corners that come later in your teams? For example, we wanted to enable work from home before work from home was a thing, just because of the practicality of it and the focus that it gave our people, and um, enabling that flexibility for them. So going behind those long-term principles and ensuring that good principles are implemented, um, not just for principles purpose, right? It also has to be practical. So going behind those long-term practical and good principles meant that while the world was trying to figure out how to work from home, um, we had people who are already equipped to work from home. Um, the team members, again, we used to have rotation of team members through various industries, through various projects, through various technology, to ensure that we have backups. So it was possible to pick the right skills with the right industry exposure at a short time frame, um, to build up this particular team. So coming back to the question, um, it's about whether you're making decisions for the future currently that will help enable you to react if something turns up unexpected. And we don't know what could turn up. So in such situations where um, we don't know what we are preparing for, if we just go by good principles and good practical outcomes, it usually eventually always ends up benefiting us in ways that we probably didn't even imagine. And the very last slide, what could have been different, or could they? Well, for this project, I'm trying to figure out some of those questions as well. Um, One of the things I'm trying to figure out is, what was the actual deadline? Was it 7 or 8 calendar days? Could it have been 14 days? Yes, we wanted the system yesterday because everybody was in a panic mode, and there was an urgency behind it all. But there are practical limitations in rolling out something like this across all states in Australia and New Zealand. And some deadlines are always going to be real, and some deadlines are going to be phantom. But even phantom deadlines can sometimes appear with a vigor. In this particular project, people did work overtime, and I personally dislike not having the right amount of work-life balance. Um, we did ensure that there were fairness, there were contingencies in terms of ensuring that the team got time to recuperate, and they had the right sort of rest during the project as well as outside after the project. They had time to recuperate, and no one was forced to work extra. Um, they all pitched in, like everybody wanted to contribute. This was like a crazy project where like people's lives were involved. But in general, IT is a place where overtime is expected in a lot of places. Is there a way in which we can ensure that things are sustainable? Um, and in cases where there is extra effort required from a team, um, making sure that the team have the time to recuperate, are they adequately compensated, like, provided time off in lieu or pay? um, I think we did quite good on all these fronts in this particular project. However, I always do wonder whether we could have avoided overtime altogether, because um, in the heat of the moment for this exciting project, everybody went in 150%. Um, could it have been delivered in 14 days and still managed to get similar sort of patient and system outcomes? Or maybe the pressure actually helped us in making fast decisions, and um, we had a very lean sort of development. But obviously, it's not sustainable for a team to run fast in the long run, which thankfully no one attempted. So we did have a phase two, and it was much calmer and done very, very gracefully. The other question was about whether to build everything from scratch or to build it from an existing IP. So in our case, we did use some existing IP to piece some of the pieces together with additional development on top of it. Um, but maybe starting from scratch could have also achieved a very similar sort of outcome. But then it wouldn't give developers the same familiarity and the confidence that they had in going as fast as they can. Like, I mean, when you start out a project and you say that, oh, we need this in a week or two, people should have the confidence that it is actually achievable. Otherwise, they wouldn't go all in on that. And like the great quote from Thomas Sowell, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. The question is, are you making the right trade-offs? And in this project's case, I do believe that we did. But you can always wonder, could we have delivered this project at a longer time with creating a system without reusable IP? But what I do not wonder is, could we have done this with another team? Because this was an exceptional group of individuals who pulled this off. And I'm really grateful that I did have the opportunity to deliver this particular project as the delivery manager. And I was the project manager for this project as well. And that I got to be a part of it, and that I have this story to tell. And I really love stories, especially when they are real, based on real incidents, and they're based on a good outcome. Thank you. You can post your questions and comments, and I'll endeavor to answer them as much as I can. And it's probably the first time I've done something like this, so any feedback is welcome as well. Thank you so much. I'll definitely try my best to answer any of your questions. So please do post them. And thank you again, and any feedback is appreciated. Thank you.